My brother's calling. Hello?
She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to...
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Reagan, and today I'm going to be doing a video about my top 10 favorite romances. So it was kind of hard for me to pick out my top 10 favorite romance books because I've read a lot of romance books in my time as a reader, and so this was a little difficult for me. Something that you guys may or may not know about me is that Colleen Hoover is like my all-time favorite author. I love everything that she's written. I think that she's a beautiful author. She just has such a way with words, and so I think like 3 of her books are in this, and I would include like all of them if I could, but that would just be a really boring video because it would just be all Colleen Hoover. So these are my top 3 favorite Colleen Hoover books, and that's even like really hard for me to choose. So I feel like all the rest of these books are kind of overshadowed by Colleen Hoover's books, but these are still my top favorite romances. So starting off, very easy decision for me is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. This is my favorite Colleen Hoover book. Well, I don't know. It's tied for my favorite Colleen Hoover book. But this book literally changed my life. This book follows Tate and Miles, and Tate is a nurse, I'm pretty sure, and she moves in with her brother for the time being until she can get her own apartment, and her brother is a pilot, and one of his pilot friends lives across the hall, and his name is Miles, obviously. So Tate and Miles strike up this kind of friends with benefits relationship. They're both like attracted to each other, but Miles always tells her, don't ask me about my past and don't expect a future. And he's really wary about opening up to Tate and telling her about anything about his past, and he just wants her to know that like their relationship is friends with benefits for right now, and he can't promise her a future. So as always in books like these, somebody gets attached and catches feelings. So Tate catches feelings, and it's kind of how her and Miles figure out how to go about this relationship together. And it flips back and forth between present and past, and in the past we follow Miles's past, and it's actually written in prose, which is so beautiful. I'm not a huge fan of poetry or anything written in prose, but this just really got me. By the end of this book, I was drowning in a pool of my own tears. It was so sad and so emotional, so I highly recommend this book. If I could recommend any, I'd recommend this book. There is some explicit scenes in here, but it is such a good book. Next up, this is the other favorite Colleen Hoover book that is tied for first place, and that is Maybe Someday, and the second book is Maybe Now. These books are everything to me. I love Maybe Someday, and I actually read this like 2 or 3 times before I even knew that there was a second book. And so my sister got me Maybe Now for Christmas this year, and so I actually just read this at the beginning of 2020, and it was so good. Maybe Someday follows Sydney and Ridge, and Sydney just moves out of her apartment at the beginning of the book because her roommate and her boyfriend have been like hooking up together behind her back. So Sydney moves out of her apartment and kind of just moves across the apartment complex in with this guy named Ridge, and they just met, and he is a guitarist and a songwriter for his brother's band, and they kind of begin to write music together. Sydney loves to write music, and so her and Ridge partner up together to write music for this band, and of course there's a romance that is involved. A huge plot line of this book is kind of a spoiler. It's not mentioned in the summary of the book, but you find out in chapter 3, and it's a really huge like subplot of this book, but I don't want to tell you because it's kind of a spoiler. But this book is so good, and if I could recommend anything, it would be this and Ugly Love. So definitely love this book, and Maybe Now just as much. Oh, P.S. My favorite part about this book is that all of the songs that Sydney and Ridge write together in the book, Colleen Hoover partnered with an artist, and he actually recorded the songs, and well, he helped her write the songs, and then he recorded them, and they're on Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube and anywhere you listen to music. So you can actually listen to the music that Sydney and Ridge write together in this book, and that's like one of my favorite aspects of this book because it ties together music and reading so effortlessly. Okay, that's all from this book, so there you go. It has gotten so dark since I started filming. It was like kind of daylight outside, but now it's like super dark. My last Colleen Hoover book is November 9. This book is one of my other favorite Colleen Hoover books. This book follows Fallon and Ben, and they meet in a diner in LA on November 9, and the next day she's supposed to be moving across the country to New York City to join Broadway, and so they meet and kind of instantly fall in love with each other, and they agree that every year on November 9th they're going to meet back at this same diner in LA and spend the whole day together. So this book follows the course of like 4 years or maybe 5 years where they meet back up together on November 9th, and we just get to watch them experience this day together. And there's so much more to this book than just that, but that's kind of all I can say because the rest is kind of spoilery. Ben is a writer and he's trying to write a book, and Fallon is trying to be successful in Broadway, so that's kind of where their lives are leading them. Anyways, this book is just so good and so phenomenal, and the romance is so good, the plot twists are so good, everything about this is just so good. Okay, that is all of Colleen Hoover's books for this video. Next up is a book series, really, that is so near and dear to my heart, and that is This Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy by Jenny Han. This is the it has like all 3 books inside this one massive book, but it is such a good series. I read these books when I was in high school, and they are young adult like romance contemporary. I don't really know what you would call it. But this book follows Belly, who goes to the beach every summer with her mom and her brother and her mom's best friend and 2 sons, and they live in their like beach house together. And Belly kind of has a thing for one of the brothers, and as you can kind of already assume, there forms a love triangle between Belly and both of the brothers, and this book is just so good. It's really a coming of age story, and it's just about love and loss and finding yourself and finding who you are as a person and really figuring out what you want out of life. And the first book, she's in high school, I'm pretty sure, and I think the second book, she's in college. I think she's in college in the second book, and then she's definitely in college in the third book. So it is a little bit more, it gets to become a little bit more new adult as the series progresses. Anyways, this series is just so good. I highly recommend this book / series. Next up, I have the Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. This book is so sweet. This book follows Stella and Michael, and Stella is, I'm pretty sure she's autistic. I don't really remember. It's been quite a while since I've read this, but she has always had trouble connecting physically with a guy, and so she hires Michael to kind of teach her how to connect physically with somebody. So they strike up that kind of relationship and ultimately fall in love. But this book is so sweet. It really it sounds like really boring when I'm telling you about it, but it's so much more than that. Stella kind of has to overcome her timidness, and she becomes more confident during the book, and Michael kind of gets thrown into this world of somebody who is on the autistic spectrum. I just love how the author so accurately displays like all of the things that come with autism. And so this book was so sweet and so cute, and I'm pretty sure I cried at the end. I don't remember, but I just absolutely loved and adored this book. And then the second book is called The Bride Test, and that one was also very good. I think I enjoyed the Kiss Quotient better, but they were both still phenomenal. Next up, this is actually a book that I just read this month and added it to my all-time favorite romance books, and that is Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. This book is so good. I don't know how I've ever gone so long without reading this book. And I'm so excited to keep reading this series because, wow, it was so good. So this book follows Beth and Wrath. And Wrath is one of the brothers of the Black Dagger Brotherhood, which is like an elite form of vampires who are fighting off their enemies. At the beginning of the book, we find out that Beth is part vampire, part human, and is about to go through transition. So her father, who she's never met, asks Wrath to kind of help guide her through that transition and be there for her when she goes through it, because his blood is like the purest and that's what she's gonna need for the transition. Anyways, they end up falling in love, and this book is just so good. I'm gonna talk about it a little bit more in my May wrap up, so I don't want to get too much into it right now, but it's just so good. I love the aspect of the brotherhood and how close they are, and this book was just so good. It was everything I needed and more out of a paranormal romance, so I highly recommend this book. The next book I have for you guys is Marriage for One by Ella Mays. This book follows Jack and Rose. Actually, I think they make a joke about how it's like just like the Titanic because they're doomed. But this is a marriage of convenience book where I'm pretty sure, it's been quite a while since I've read it, but I'm pretty sure that Jack offers to marry Rose so that she can save like her business, or I don't know. Somehow they have to get married, but they get married, and he's very cold and distant at the beginning of this book. And this book is so slow burn in all the right places, and it's just so sweet. Like, this was the kind of book that made my stomach turn because the chemistry was just so good, and like the slow burn was just so good. It just made my stomach clench. I don't know. It was so good. I highly recommend this book. Next up, I have The Silent Waters by Brittany C. Cherry. I talked about this book in my romance recommendations about mental health issues, and of course, I still have to include it in this video because it is one of my favorites by Brittany C. Cherry. This book is just everything that I needed and more. It was so good. So this book follows Brooks and Maggie, and at the very beginning of the story, we see Maggie when she's like 5 years old, and something really traumatic happens to her at the beginning of the story. And after this traumatic experience, she actually becomes mute and doesn't speak anymore. And I think she also deals with agoraphobia. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I really should be looking that up, but it's like where you're scared to leave the house. So she never leaves the house and she doesn't speak. And Brooks, who is her brother's best friend, kind of takes her on his wing and just like loves on her as a friend. And eventually it grows into something more, but he just really understands her and gets her even though she can't actually speak what she's thinking. And so over the years, they both deal with their own kind of mental health issues, but this book was just so sweet, and it kind of spans over like a really long period of time. I think it really starts out when they're in high school, and by the end of the book they're like young adults. So this book was just so good. I showed this in my mental health issues video, but like I've tabbed so many dog-eared so many pages of this book because there's just so many sweet moments and so many beautifully written lines that I need to go back and really annotate it. But this book was so phenomenal. I highly recommend. Next up, we have the Thoughtless series by S.E. Stevens. This is one of my favorite romance series. It's just so good and written so well. This book follows Kira and Kellen, and at the beginning of this book, Kira's actually dating a guy named Denny, and they move across the country for Denny's like internship or something, and they end up moving in with his best friend Kellen, who's also in a band. So they move into Kellen's house, and shortly after, Denny gets offered a position in, I think, Portland, and so, or I don't know where, but really far from where they're staying. And so he has to go away for a few months, and it's really hard on their relationship, and somehow they end up breaking up, and she ends up sleeping with Kellen just as like a bad mistake, and the next day Denny comes home and says he wants to be with her. So she kind of deals with how to go about the fact that she like kind of cheated on him, kind of didn't, because they were broken up, but didn't tell him what happened. And so anyways, her and Kellen still have feelings for each other as the book goes on. So this book does have trigger warnings for cheating. Like, I don't really know, like, were they cheating, were they not? I mean, they're kind of dating, she had feelings, I don't know. But this book is just so phenomenal, and the series itself, there's 3 books in the series, it's just the first, but they're also really good. I actually haven't read the 3rd one yet, but I just love this series. It's everything I need and more in a romance. It's sweet, it's intense, it's just, it's good. The last book I have for you guys for this video is To the Stars by Molly McAdams. This book follows Harlow and Knox, and it has been a really long time since I read this book. I think I read this when I was in high school, or maybe like my freshman year of college. So I don't really remember much about this book, or if I would even still love it as much as I did when I read it. But this book just stuck with me so much. I just adored everything about this book. So at the beginning of this book, Harlow and Knox kind of fall for each other or something, and they promise each other that they're gonna wait for each other, because I'm pretty sure she was like 15 and he was like 18, and it just like wasn't gonna work, or somehow it was illegal or something. So they promised they'd wait for each other. Well, he goes off to college, and somehow it's like 10 years later, and she's like an adult and he's an adult, and she ends up getting engaged to this other guy, and they get married, and turns out he's very abusive to her. And some of the scenes were actually really hard to read, how abusive he was to her and how manipulative, and so that was a little hard to read. But eventually Knox finds his way back to Harlow, and it's kind of them reconnecting and her reaching out to him, telling him that she's in danger, and it's just intense but sweet, and just gives you all the feels. And while I don't remember too much about this book, I do remember that when I read it, I absolutely loved it. I devoured it. I read it in like one sitting. It was just so good. So I highly recommend this book. Well, that is all the books I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books and how you feel about them as well. I will see you guys in another one of my videos. Bye.
She's a Mona Lisa. Everyone's lining up to see her. There must be something bad.